welcome to my FlossTube channel, Thread the Needle. My name is Vani, and I am here with a follow-up video to my very first demo video that I did. It was to demonstrate how I do cross-country stitching in a diagonal with no crossover into another diagonal. So when I posted the video, I was happy to see that quite a number of you really enjoyed it, and that always shocks me. I know that you're actually watching what I'm putting out there. But what made me really happy was that people asked questions and people said how helpful it was, which is why I put it out there in the first place. So I'm very happy for those of you who enjoyed the video and found it helpful, and I'm here to help. So I thought I would do a follow-up video while I do a mini stitch with me, because I got a couple of requests to do a stitch with me and I wasn't sure if I would be up to it. I don't know. I always wonder, do I have enough to talk about? But I guess we'll find out. For this video, I think I'll manage a little bit. I've got some questions lined up that I want to answer from the previous video. So before I go ahead, so this is a mini moose crossing by Donna Gelsinger from the Heaven and Earth Designs. And I'm thoroughly enjoying this so much. In my last video, we worked on this diagonal right here, and I'm going to start in this diagonal. So as you can see, I already started with my first color selection. That was the top dark black color in that corner. I've got this much. So next step is, once you finish this section where the stitches appear, you find it where it is down the diagonal, no matter where it may be. And I can see in my pattern that it is going to fall somewhere around here. Excuse me as I count my way. So you can see there's one hole here. That is the one grid mark. And then the diagonal to it, of course, is right here. And then we're going to go... Okay, we're going to take it all the way across. So counting is very important. I always say that counting is very important, especially in this beginning stage of stitching cross country. Sorry, I think I knocked the camera. Of stitching cross country in the diagonal. Because as soon as you have a base of stitches down, it can be very, very convenient to find your stitches as you go along. So I've got this stitches from the top that I had here, and the next place it comes is here. And you'll notice, of course, that I just carry my thread down to where I need to go next. So in my previous video, one of the first questions, and this was asked multiple times by different people, so I thought I would start with this one. The question was, how do I end my threads? Now, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't often show the backs of my projects, whether on social media, on my FlossTube, nowhere. Only because the backs of my project are the backs of my project. It is what it is. And they are going to be messy because, come on, we're doing cross-country stitching. So there's going to be carryover with floss in the back. It is going to get messy. But to be perfectly honest, that doesn't bother me at all. I'll tell you why. For me, it's all about the front. If the front looks good and the back is the way it is because it helped, then who am I to say anything? I know there's a lot of people out there who are very particular about how their back looks. More power to them. I can't do it. Even when I was parking on my full coverages, my back still ended up messy. And they say that parking helps you keep it neat in the back and the front. I never found it to be such. And for me, more often than not, I find that whatever I need to do to get to where I want to be, I'm happy with it. And if the end result of a messy back doesn't affect the neatness on the front, I don't really care much. But of course, that's just my taste. If you want a neat back then you can work on it. And there are tips and tricks out there for a very neat back. It doesn't work for me. I don't mind. So of course, when I'm cross country stitching, there is a lot of carryover in the back. So I'm gonna show you my back, even though I don't usually do that because I know people don't like seeing messy backs. So bear with me. I'm almost to the end of this thread and you'll see what happens and how I end my floss. Really, all I do is, I'm almost to the end. All I do is just pass it through. Sorry if you heard the door bang there. My son is gone out for a run. But I just wanted to show you how I finish my thread. Basically, as I get to the end of the thread that's available, we're almost there. You can notice, I don't know, with the background, you can notice right there. That's how much I got left. I just want to finish this row before I have to actually end. I like to play chicken with my floss. I don't know about you guys, but I like to use as much as humanly possible. All right, so we're at the end. All right, everyone ready? Because here comes the messy back part, okay? I'm warning you, it's messy, but it's okay. We will survive and it'll all be well, okay? So I'm gonna turn it over. Okay, hang on. All right, here she is. So here's the back. And these are the stitches that I just did. You can see my black thread crossing over, and here it is. So basically I just take this and I find a place where I want to pull the threads through. So I'll just pass them through a few stitches, once, and then twice, and that anchors the threads. And then you just snip off the extra. And there you go, back to the front. It's as if you couldn't even see it before. Okay, so as I get my thread ready, so for those of you who asked how I end my threads, that is how I end my threads. I'm sorry if I shocked you with my messy back, but you asked, so I had to show, because I am forever one to want to try my best at giving people what they ask for. So here I am, being open and honest about my very messy back. And that'll probably be the last time that you see it. I probably won't turn it over to show you again because that's enough of that. Now, you can see so another thing that came up was, what do I do when the floss ends, but I still have that more of that color to stitch in this diagonal? You have two choices. You can either start with the next color and then take it as far as your floss will take you, or you just finish this color in there, and then when you get to the end of this diagonal here. So yeah, sorry, I'm losing my place. There's so many questions that needed to be answered, but let's start with this one. So I have decided to pick the same color up again and continue stitching wherever it comes within the diagonal. Okay, so, and then I'll explain what happens next. So the next question, I think, is a follow-up to what I was just discussing. I'm really sorry if this video is all over the place. I thought I could be very well organized, but I'm not. I'm so sorry, but I hope this still helps some people. All right, so let's get back to it. So I'm gonna pick up where I left off. We're gonna go right here. This time I didn't do the loop start method. I just put a knot at the end of the thread and I'm just starting to stitch. So we're gonna go like this. So the next question that came up, and this one also, quite a number of people were curious about this one. It was, what happens when you reach the end of the page and do I carry on across and down to the adjoining pages? So here's how I do it. I'm gonna check and see where my page lines are. So my page lines for this project are, we're doing this one right now, right here. So the page actually ends right here and it goes down till, it goes down a bit further. I don't know if the camera will get it. I think it goes down to here. So here is my page lines. So it still falls within my Q-snap frame. So I don't have to move the Q-snap to get to another page. It's all within it. So what I like to do is when I get to this diagonal, it's still touching the top of the page, but the next diagonal, it's actually touching the side of the page, kind of like how this diagonal touches the side of the page, not the bottom. So when I get here, what I would like to do is, because I can see where the other stitches are, I'll just feather the stitches a little bit so that I don't get a page line. Some projects, I will just continue the diagonals on, but I won't go down further than the page line because I don't want to have to stitch outside of my Q-snap and constantly move it. So I will continue the diagonals across, but I will feather the stitches on the page ends so that if I want to go all the way across that way, if I want to go all the way back down this way for my next page, I can do either or. So that's what happens when I reach the page end. Because I do use Pattern Keeper, it is very easy to just continue on with the page. So what I'll do is, instead of, because this page ends right here. So let me see if I can properly kind of explain what I'm going on. I'll use it. Okay, so this is where the page actually ends. This is the corner of the page. So instead of, and then this is the second diagonal that's going to come up right here, all the way down. So instead of stopping here, I'll just do the next diagonal. But what will happen at the bottom is that instead of stopping, let's say that was the end of the page, instead of stopping and doing a straight line across here, I will maybe feather a couple of stitches on the bottom. So feathering basically means that you'll just do a couple of stitches, not this many, but a couple of stitches into the next, into the page line down here at the bottom. In another couple of diagonals, we'll get there and I'll be able to really show you properly what I actually mean by that if I'm not able to explain myself properly. So for right now, all I can say is that if you don't know what feathering means, it means that so that you don't get a line at the page ends, you feather your stitches, which means that you stitch one stitch in the first line. Oh, I'm gonna zoom in, maybe that'll be easier. Okay, now hang on now. All right, so basically that would mean if this was right here, just this edge, let's pretend this edge right here is the page end. So if I'm feathering my stitches, the stitch next to this X, I would stitch this block right here. And then I would skip this next one. Then I would stitch this one, but not this one. So essentially, it's like a checkerboard. And that is how you would feather your stitches to avoid some page lines. I hope I explained that well enough for you. So let's continue on with stitching this block. Now, I asked many of you your opinion on how I should go about doing a stitch with me. My first thing that I was trying to decide was the camera angle. Now you'll notice I have this, it's not straight on, but it's not totally at an angle. I really wanted you to be able to see what I'm stitching, but at the same time, I didn't want to put the camera right here so all you can see is my hands the whole time. I wanted you to see what I'm stitching. And because I'm stitching double-handed, I thought this would be the easiest way to go about it. Okay, let's see where we are. So I hope the camera angle and everything works well for you guys as you watch me stitch along with this one, as we go through our follow-up questions from the previous video that we did. Now, let's see what we have next on our list of questions. What do you do when your diagonal is longer than your Q-snap or whatever frame you're using to hold it? Do you move your frame with the diagonal or stitch until the frame end and go back after and finish your line of diagonals? That was a very long question, but I think I kind of already answered it. So basically, if my diagonal won't be longer than my Q-snap because I'll stop at the page end and feather the stitches a little bit so that it's not a straight line across. And I will do the same on this edge if I don't want to continue the diagonals along the horizontal. So long story short, I think I already gave you a very long answer to that question. I guess both questions were kind of the same, hey? Let's see. How do I get the diagonals into Pattern Keeper? Well, that is a very, very good question. And let me just finish this so I can show you. I have realized that while I'm concentrating on what to say, I'm not a very fast stitcher. I've slowed down because I'm thinking too much about what I need to say and how I should say it. And then I just realized that I went off on a tangent. I was talking about one thing, and then I went off on a tangent and I forgot to finish my thought on the other one. So I was talking about Stitch With Me's. So I asked you lovely people out there for your opinion on what I should do for Stitch With Me's. And you all had some lovely answers and thoughts and views, and it was very nice to hear that you'd be interested in me doing Stitch With Me's. And so some of you said that I can just chit chat like this while I'm stitching. Some of you said I can put music in the background. And some of you said I don't have to say anything or put any music. You just want to watch me stitch. And I'm like, all right, let's give it a go. But I thought I would finish these demo videos first. I've got planned to do this one, which is a follow-up to the original cross country in a diagonal video. Then the next demo video that I want to do is how to do the same method, but when you have, let's say, can you all see how much floss I have left on here? Let's say this was the end of the diagonal. I had all this floss left. Instead of finishing off here and finishing the thread and ending it in the back, I would continue in the next diagonal. So that's what I'm going to demo in my next video. But we'll continue on with this follow-up because there's actually some things that I want to discuss with this method. So we're going to do this, and then I'll show you how I actually put in the diagonals in Pattern Keeper. Pattern Keeper has been such a joy. I am so, so, so happy that the app came out. I was always, prior to this, a paper chart stitcher. And with full coverage, the way I would stitch it would be I would just take one page of the chart and I would pick one symbol and I would use one color of a highlighter. Most probably I would use yellow. And I would find that symbol, because back then I used to be a cross-country stitcher all across the page. So that means this color that I'm doing here, I would do it all over the page, not just in this diagonal here. So when I was stitching from paper charts, I would find that symbol throughout the entire page and I would stitch it. Then once I had stitched it, I would take another highlighter, probably pink. Yellow and pink were my preferred highlighter colors. And then I would color over all the yellow that I had just stitched. But now, with a click of a button, Pattern Keeper does it with me. And boy, does that make me happy. I don't have to search for symbols. I don't have to guess what color I missed. It just does all the work for me. And I could not be happier. And it gives you so many options. It's great for all kinds of stitchers. It's great for cross-country stitchers. It's great for extreme cross-country stitchers. And do you guys know what an extreme cross-country stitcher is? Those are the people who are brave enough to do cross-country stitching all the way across the entire project. I mean, come on. That takes a lot of dedication. Me, I don't know if you know this about me, but I get bored. I cannot stick to one project long enough to get a page finished, let alone do cross country stitching. Can you imagine if I had a project that had so much 310 and then I had to do all of the 310 before I did another color? Oh my God, I would drive myself bananas. So I do want to try extreme cross country at least once, just to say that I did it and to say that it's not for me. I know it's not for me because come on, we know I don't have the patience for that. Okay, let me just count for 1 second. 1, 2, 3, 4, and the stitch goes right here. Yeah, so they're like, there's no way I would be any good at cross-country stitching, extreme cross-country stitching. But I digress. So like I was saying, Pattern Keeper is good for those two methods, and it's good for people who like to park. You know, I tried it for even when I was parking, and I do find it convenient because it helps you mark on the chart electronically where you have parked your threads. And you know you're doing the right one because that symbol is already highlighted for you. Okay, so this is the last stitch in the diagonal. So I'll show you another way. All right, I may have spoken too early. I'll show you one more way of how I end the thread. So when you are ready to do, now some people might not like this method because it leaves too many knots in the backs of their work and that creates bulk and yeah, some people won't like it, but I'm here to tell you that this is how I do it. That doesn't mean that you should do it this way. That doesn't mean that this is the right way to do it. This is just the way that I do it. And I do it because of convenience sake. I do it because it doesn't bother me. The bulkiness in the back, it doesn't affect the front of it. So here's how I do it. So I will pull it up, but make sure that you don't pull the floss all the way through. Just enough so you get this end through, but you still leave a loop of thread in the back. Then you're gonna get ready to stitch the last loop. All right, are we ready to see my messy back again? All right, here we go. I'm gonna flip it over again. So here is the loop, can we see? Here's the loop that I left. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to pull it all the way back in. So you're finishing on the front, your stitch is being finished, and we're gonna loop our thread through that. So I like to go once, oh, that didn't actually happen. So once through it, twice, and then 3 times through that loop that we had, and then I pull it closed, and you have your secure knot and your stitches are going nowhere. So once again, that is another way that you can secure your thread. Okay, all right, so back to the front. So we have completed one color in this diagonal as I search for my floss. Okay, so now I'm going to try and see if I can show you. I'm going to zoom out so I can show you how on Pattern Keeper, without showing you the pattern, I'm going to go like this. Okay, so here it is, Pattern Keeper. So you can't see the diagonals now. I'm going to see how close I can go without, okay, there's the diagonals. Because I'm not allowed showing you the actual pattern because of the copyright laws. So I'm going to do my best to try and do this without doing any of that. So I'm going to grab my little stylus, which is hard to get out for some reason. Okay, and say yes. Okay, I'm going to try and do this left-handed, so bear with me. You're going to click the little wheels right here. Okay, then it gives you all the options. This is just general options. This is the parking color, but we're not going to use that. This is the search color. So when I search for a color, it's green. That's the color that I have selected. So that's what that means. Then this next section here is diagonal lines. You can either have the lines going from the upper left to the lower right or the lower left to the upper right. And I've picked this one, and I've got in intervals of 10 or 20, and you can pick a color for your lines. So just to show you what looks different, so I'll show you what it looks like now. So you can see you can't tell the color, but it's dark green, and I've got it going from the upper right to the bottom left, and in 10 stitches across. So we're going to go back into the settings just to show you how it would look if it was different. Let's do the other direction and take that one off and do 20. And here's what it looks like. So you can see they move direction. So it's very convenient. And this is how I get my diagonals. I'm just going to put it back to where the way it was. So this is how I do my diagonals. Oh, I forgot to take the other ones off. So for those of you who watch and ask how I do the pointed end on my Siamese fighting fish, I put the diagonals in both ways. And when I get to the bottom of the page, I do right here. I stitch this triangle so that I get a zigzag effect in the bottom of the page so that I don't have a straight line across as I'm stitching my stitches. So I think I had that one. So let's see if that's, and we're back to normal. Perfect. So next what I have to do is I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to mark off the stitches that I just completed for you. And then we can move on to the next color. All right, on to the next color, which I have already prepared. And this one only has a couple of stitches, so we'll just do those really quickly. And there we go. This top edge is always hard to stitch when you have it such close to, and I couldn't get it in the right hole because it's so close to the top edge, so we're just going to redo that one really quickly. There we go. We're going to do it from this way. See if that makes it easier. It's really weird talking to myself while I'm stitching. Usually I'm just like watching TV or just have some kind of TV show on in the background. Even if I'm not paying attention to it, I just have it on in the background. So it's really weird just me talking to myself. So I hope it doesn't sound weird to you guys. All right. And there we go. This color is now complete. Okay, so in the next color, we're going to start up in this corner. All right, now the next question that I had come up was, do you get, where is it? Yes. Do you get diagonal page lines? You know what? You don't actually. I don't know if you can tell, but I've got no diagonal lines showing up here. It's actually a really good method when doing that, because I tried it with the parking and I found I got column lines and I really didn't like that. I mean, after the project was washed and stretched and framed, I can't notice it as much, but I know it's there and I can see it if I look really closely, those column lines. But with this method, the diagonal cross country stitching, I do not get diagonal lines. The only time that you have to be careful is if you are stitching blocks of colors. So this is a lot of confetti, a lot of colors all over the place, and you don't have to worry about it at all. I've never had an issue. But when you are stitching this method where there's blocks of colors, blocks of one color, not even this, I mean like a whole section of one color, like this much area, you have to be a little bit careful with the tension of your stitches because you could get some diagonal page lines. And so when I have to stitch on something like that that has a lot of background color of one single color, I'll just be a little bit more careful of my stitching tension. I might not pull the stitches as tight, or yeah, I'll just keep an eye on it and make sure that it all goes well. And there we go. And so a lot of you all have also asked, what is the name of my frame? So I'm here to tell you that I'm going to insert a small little video to show you my frame. It is a lovely, lovely frame. It has a nice base. It holds my Q-snap securely, and it has a OTT light attachment with a magnifier, which I'm thankful to say I don't use at the moment because my eyesight is still good enough. So here is my stand. It is a Daylight Stitch Smart stand. So as you can see, it has a metal base, and then you have the clamp right here where you put your Q-snap frame or any frame really, and it can, with this knob, you can tighten and loosen the rotation of the frame so it can go 360, and it's super convenient when you need to flip back and forth to the front and the back of your project. And then of course it has this attachment here, which is plugged. You just stick it in the slot right here, and there's another slot here. I believe you can also buy another attachment to hold like a chart or something, but I work off of a tablet. So this is the light here that attaches into the hole right here, and I'm going to turn it on so you can see it is very bright like daylight. And then also up here you can open it up and it's a magnifying glass, but I thankfully very rarely have to use that at the moment. So this is my stand. I really enjoy it, especially when I'm in my stitching spot, which is usually my chair in the family room, and I want to stitch two-handed. It works great. It holds the frame very nicely, and if you sit in the right kind of chair, it can slip right underneath the base of your chair, and it's super convenient. So that was my stand. I really like my stand, I have to say. It provides me with some really nice conveniences. So I would definitely recommend it. So as you can see, I started the next color. I put in a couple stitches there and then one there, and I'm finding it everywhere that it falls within this diagonal grid. And then we'll just move along to the next questions that I had from my previous demo video. The next question is, when you do the blue dots, do you every 10 points, do you count out every 10, or do you use a ruler with markings for each different count of fabric? And what do you do for large projects? Wouldn't that get really tedious? So here's how I do it. Whatever fabric count I'm working on, I count it. I just concentrate on the holes and look really close, and I'll count 10 stitches out. So I won't use a ruler to measure it out because I don't quite trust that. I want to count it out myself, and I will mark it off. And I will only grid enough to cover a full page because that's all that really fits in my Q-snap frame at the moment. But I will also grid one line outside of the page so that I can move my Q-snap and keep moving on, and I know where to start the gridding again. So I will just grid as I go, basically, I guess. I will grid as much as I can without going crazy, but no, I won't grid the entire project at the beginning. That would just take forever, and I'm always too impatient to start my project, so that's a definite no-go on that. I will just grid however much is needed until it's time to move on. So the next question I have coming up is, and I'm reading it from the point of view of the viewers as if they're asking me. So they said, I'm assuming you're doing a page at a time. Traveling far could be very difficult sometimes when you're traveling far for confetti. And yes, that's true. So I do. Well, I mean, for me, I'm not traveling across the whole page. I'm just traveling within this diagonal from the beginning to the end of the diagonal, wherever it may take me. And then I stop my thread and I end it when it's done for this diagonal. So it's not the same as if you were doing cross-country stitching for the entire page. Then, and I have done that, then yes, you would have to travel far for confetti, but I don't mind that at all. I don't have any issues with that. I just make sure that I count properly. I still grade my fabric. I don't think I have done a project yet from when I started to stitch full coverage that I have not gridded my fabric, because that has helped me immensely when it comes to just the overall, I guess, ease of stitch that it gives me to know that I've got all my stitches counted out and I know where I need to go. And then as you go along, you can count less, because the stitches that you have already placed in your cross-country section can be used to identify where your stitches need to lie. So as you keep putting more stitches in your diagonal and it starts to get filled up, you don't have to count as much, because when you look at your pattern, you'll notice that you can correlate where you need to go based on what's already been stitched. And I'll show you an example, because here, for these few stitches that I did for this color, I had to count a little bit to make sure I was putting it in the right spot. But then, as I get finished with this section right here, and almost done. So since I already have quite a few stitches put in this diagonal area, I'm going to find the next couple of stitches a little easier to find, because the next stitch is right underneath here. So I don't have to count from a strategically placed grid dot. I don't have to count from here or here. I can just count, as long as I did this properly, I can just look at it and see, oh, that's where my next stitch needs to go. So I know it goes here, because on my pattern, it shows me exactly that it's under this brown stitch here that I'm putting in this color. So as you get more and more through your diagonal with the cross-country stitching, it gets much easier to identify where your stitches belong. Now, next question we'll move along to is, I'm gonna pause stitching for a second as I read this question, because it's a longer one. Okay, so let me find where I am. I'm gonna see if I can manage to stitch and talk at the same time, which I have to agree I am finding very difficult. I'm usually a much faster stitcher, but I'm finding that because of the angle of the way that I have my frame placed and where the camera has to be placed, I'm sitting at a awkward angle to stitch at my normal speed, which is why I skipped a question. And the question was, as I check with my notes, how long does it take you to fill in a diagonal? To be perfectly honest with you, I have never timed myself from start to finish on a diagonal. One of these days I will, just so that I can properly answer that question. But I can't even tell you as I'm stitching this how long it takes me, because I'm definitely not stitching at my normal speed. I am, first of all, I'm having to start and stop, and then I'm have to talk and stitch at the same time. That's like patting your head and rubbing your stomach, or yes, it's really hard to do the two things at the same time. Who knew? All right, so as we go along, let me read out this question. What do you do with the threads you only used for about 2 stitches in the start of the diagonal? Do you let them hang on the back? Do you cut them off? In that case, how do you know what color it is? Do you pull them back on the numbered floss keeper? So let's start with the beginning of that question. What do you do when there's 2 threads, only 2 stitches, and then what do you do with the rest of the diagonal? If there's only 2 stitches to do, and that's it for the whole diagonal, I will, of course, finish that thread and put it back on my floss keeper here. This is not a floss keeper, it is a thread keeper. And to answer the next part of the question, would I ever leave them hanging in the back? No, I would not. Because yes, that would definitely create a mess in the back. There's no way I would just leave them hanging in the back, parked that way. I would finish it off. However, if those 2 stitches at the top still had more stitches anywhere else in the diagonal, I would just carry the thread as I've been doing and continue stitching this color as I did for this color right here. They started at the top. There was a couple there, one there, and then I'm just continuing on down, stitching it down here. Whoops, sorry guys. I'm going to just shift it over a little bit so you can see the bottom of the diagonal of where I am. So yeah, so that is what I would do. I would never leave them hanging in the back. That's just a recipe for disaster. And I guess the next follow-up to that one is, in that case, how do you know what color it is? There's no way I would know what color that is because when it's on a project like this, all the colors are very similar, so I would never do that. If I were to park it, I would be parking it in the front and then I would mark my pattern where it is. So that's most of that question. What was the end of that? Do you put them back on the numbered floss keeper? So I don't have the floss keeper. I have these little guys that I put all of them in, and then I put them in my box. My floss boxes. So yeah, so I hope that clearly answered your question. It was a large question with multiple parts. I'm happy to answer them. I hope I answered it clearly enough for you to get the answer that you were looking for. Now, as we continue on with this one, well, I gotta take this one out because it's not in the diagonal, but it is a connecting stitch. But let's just do this. There we go. Now, next question. And so this is another question of someone wanting to know what brand stand I'm using to hold my Q-snap. So as I mentioned in the little inserted video, it is a Daylight Stitch Smart Stand. I think in my previous video I posted a link, an Amazon link, to where I got the stand, so I can do that again for those of you who are interested. Now, what do you do with the thread on the back if you're going to use it in the next section? So this, I understand what they're asking. So you can notice with this one, I have a bit of floss left, right? So even though there's only a little tiny section left to do, I am going to have some thread left. And in my next video, demo video, not this one, I will go over a method that I call Diagonal Cross Country Stitching with crossing over into the next diagonal. So that just means that you'll just continue going until the floss finishes. And that way you don't have to worry about ending the thread and weaving it into the back of the stitches in the back. You can just continue stitching until there is no more thread to use. But I'm going to save that demonstration and explanation for my next demo video after I get this one done. Now, almost done here with this color. Let's see what the next question is. When a diagonal requires more than one piece of thread for one color, do you finish the color by threading a new thread, or do you continue with the next color where the first thread ended and start the second thread of that color when it is open space again? Okay, so long and short of that question is, what do you do when you only have enough floss on your needle to not get through all the stitches that are needed for this particular symbol? What I would do, and if you've noticed what I will do, I will finish the thread off, weave in the ends, and take some more floss of the same color, finish the stitches in that diagonal, so I'm done with that color and I don't have to worry about it again in that diagonal. That's just the way I go, but you do have the option of stopping where you've finished and picking up a whole new color and then coming back to this one again later on. I prefer this just to be done with that color, not having to pick it up out of the box again. And let's see, I only have a few more questions to go. Let's see what is next. So my next question is, have you ever used this technique using continental or tent stitch? Would you go about it the same way? So for those of you who don't know, continental stitching or tent stitching means that basically you're doing just a half stitch. So for the stitch that I'm doing right now, I would stop. Okay, not like that. That's not up, but there you go. I would stop like that with just a half. This is not a good color to sample to show you how to do this, but basically you just do one leg of the cross. And I think I'm not very familiar with the methods, but I believe it's either called continental or tent stitch or anything. Also, it depends on the way that you stitch. So if you're always doing them from bottom left to top right, it's called something, and then on the back it all looks the same too. So no, I do not stitch continental and tent stitch. It's just not something that I want to do. I've never, it's never interested me. I prefer my full coverages to be full crosses. But I don't see why this method wouldn't work. For that method, I don't see any issues with that at all. If someone does try it out, point us all in the right direction so we can also see how that works out. Next question. Do you just finish a page diagonally, or do you fill your Q-snap as much as possible? So I think we already went over this question. I fill in my diagonal. My page end is actually here. I will do this diagonal and go to the bottom edge of the page end, which I'm going to zoom out so you can see, which I can't right now, but it's just a little bit further than where the camera shows. I think what my plan is, I'll just stitch straight across the project, but stop towards the end of the page and feather the stitches on the bottom so that there's not a straight line that has probably a good chance of leaving a line page. So I won't do that. So I'll keep going on these diagonals. So there will be the length of one page diagonal. And we're going to keep going. Let's see. What do you do at a page end? And I think, the next couple of questions are the same. Can you say what you do at a page end? Or do you just ignore page edges because you can with Pattern Keeper? And does it then make the diagonals unmanageable because of their length? So I believe I just answered that question. I will continue with the diagonals. I'll go all the way across the project, even though the page ends here. I'll do this diagonal, then I'll do this diagonal, then I'll do this. However, yes, I will ignore the page lines, the horizontal, perpendicular, the vertical page lines, but I will not ignore the horizontal page lines. I hope that makes sense. I think as I go along with this project, it will make more and more sense. And I hope you guys can be patient with me as we do that. Let's see. Do you take the time to make sure that your threads don't get twisted? Well, here's the thing. No, I do not. There is a method where you make sure, there's even a laying tool where I think it's like you can slip it onto your finger and you use it to make sure that the stitches lay flat, like so. But I don't. If I see that my thread is getting twisted, I'll just give it a twist with my hand as I'm stitching. Usually I'll do it with my right hand, which you can't see, it's right here. So I'll just twist the threads as I go, as I'm stitching in the opposite direction that I notice that it is being twisted. So, and that seems to be suiting me just fine for the moment. I haven't had any issues with extremely severely twisted thread. So that is the end of the questions that were asked of me in the previous demo video. So I hope my follow-up video here has helped anybody who had similar questions but didn't get a chance to post it in the comment section. And if there are other questions, you can ask me in the comment section of this video, and I will do my best to answer them whenever I am able to.